The garage smelled of motor oil and old coffee. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, squinting at the engine before him. It was a Tuesday. Unremarkable. The kind of day that blended into all the others. He'd been working on Mrs. Patterson's sedan since dawn, and his back ached. The bell above the door chimed. He glanced up, expecting another local with car trouble. Instead, a woman stepped inside, elegant and out of place. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor. She wore a tailored coat, her dark hair swept back, eyes scanning the cluttered space. Behind her, a small boy clung to her hand, wide-eyed and silent. Daniel straightened, suddenly aware of the grease on his shirt. The woman's gaze found him, and something flickered in her expression. Recognition. His pulse quickened. He knew that face. It had haunted him for years, a memory of one night, one mistake he'd never been able to forget. She stepped closer, her voice steady but soft when she finally spoke. "Hello, Daniel. It's been a long time." He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The boy tugged at her sleeve and she glanced down, then back at him. Her lips parted, and the words that followed shattered his world. "This is Leo, your son." The rag slipped from his fingers. 4 years. 4 years since that night at the conference hotel, when she'd been just another beautiful stranger seeking escape, and he'd been installing security systems to pay off debt. They'd talked until dawn, shared secrets like confessions. Then she'd vanished. No name, no number, just a ghost. Now she stood before him with proof of what they'd created, and Daniel felt the ground shift beneath his boots. Daniel's workshop fell silent, except for the hum of a distant radio. He stared at the child, searching for traces of himself in the boy's features. Leo had her dark hair, but his eyes held a familiar shape, and his chin carried the same stubborn angle Daniel saw in the mirror. The woman watched him process the revelation, her posture rigid despite the softness in her gaze. She seemed prepared for rejection, for anger, for demands. Daniel felt all of those things swirling inside him, yet what emerged was simpler. "Why now?" She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for miles. Her name was Claire Montgomery, she explained, CEO of Montgomery Tech Industries. She'd kept Leo's secret, raised him alone, never intending to disrupt Daniel's life. But Leo had started asking questions about his father that she could no longer deflect. A child deserved truth, she said, even uncomfortable truth. Daniel's mind reeled. A billionaire CEO. She could have any man she wanted, yet she'd chosen to tell him. A mechanic barely scraping by. She wasn't asking for money or marriage or anything except acknowledgement. Leo deserved to know his father existed. The boy played with a toy car near the doorway, oblivious to the weight of adult conversation. Daniel crouched down, bringing himself to eye level. "Hey, buddy." Leo looked up, curious but cautious. Something passed between them, wordless and profound, like the first thread of connection being spun. Claire's eyes glistened, and she turned away quickly, composing herself. This was real. This was happening. And Daniel's simple, predictable life would never be the same. Claire suggested they talk somewhere private. The diner 2 blocks down seemed neutral enough, and Daniel found himself walking beside her, Leo between them chattering about the cars he'd seen in the garage. Inside the diner they claimed a booth near the back. Coffee arrived in chipped mugs. Leo colored on a paper placemat with crayons the waitress provided. Claire explained everything with clinical precision. She'd discovered the pregnancy weeks after their encounter, tried to find him, but only knew his first name and that he worked security installations. By the time she'd tracked him down, she'd convinced herself he wouldn't want the burden. She built her empire, raised Leo with nannies and tutors, gave him everything except the one thing he truly needed. Daniel listened, anger and wonder battling inside him. He'd missed 3 years. First steps, first words, all the moments parents treasure. Yet he couldn't entirely blame her. That night he'd been nobody, just a guy with debts and dreams too small to matter. "What do you want from me?" Claire met his eyes without flinching. She wanted him to know Leo, to build a relationship if he chose. No obligations, no legal traps, just opportunity. She'd signed papers drawn up by her lawyers ensuring he'd have rights, but no forced responsibilities. Daniel's head spun. Most men would jump at this, a connection to wealth and power, but he saw through her polished exterior to the lonely woman beneath, someone who'd carried this secret like a stone. "I want to know him, but on my terms." Claire nodded slowly, relief softening her features. Leo looked up from his coloring. "Are you my daddy?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Daniel's throat tightened. He'd never imagined fatherhood, never planned for it. Yet here was this small human looking at him with innocent expectation. He glanced at Claire, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Permission, or perhaps encouragement. Daniel knelt beside the booth, bringing himself level with Leo's earnest face. "Yeah, buddy, I am." Leo considered this with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could muster, then returned to his crayons, as if the revelation changed nothing. For him, perhaps it didn't. But for Daniel, the world had reorganized itself around this tiny axis. Claire explained her proposal. She'd rented a house nearby for the month, wanting Leo to experience small-town life, to know his father's world before deciding next steps. Daniel could visit whenever he wanted, spend time with Leo, let the relationship develop naturally. No cameras, no press, no intrusions from her corporate life. Just a father and son learning each other. Daniel agreed, though uncertainty gnawed at him. What did he know about raising kids? His own father had been absent, a shadow of disappointment and empty bottles. He'd sworn never to repeat those mistakes, yet here he was, thrust into a role he'd never auditioned for. They exchanged phone numbers. Claire paid the bill, despite his protest, and they walked back to the garage where a sleek black car waited, driver standing at attention. "Tomorrow?" Claire nodded. Leo waved from the car window as they pulled away, and Daniel stood in the parking lot long after they'd disappeared, wondering if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his life. That evening, Daniel sat in his small apartment above the garage, staring at his phone. Claire had texted the address. The house she'd rented was on Maple Street, the nicest neighborhood in town, where doctors and lawyers lived behind white picket fences. He felt out of place just thinking about it. His friend Marco called, wanting to grab beers, but Daniel declined without explanation. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? Sleep came in fragments. He dreamed of Leo's face, of Claire's guarded expression, of all the years he'd lost. By dawn, he'd made a decision. If he was going to be a father, he'd do it right. No half measures, no excuses. He showered, put on his cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt he'd worn to his mother's funeral 3 years ago. The house on Maple Street was exactly as he'd imagined, elegant, modern, temporary. Claire answered the door in casual clothes, looking younger without her corporate armor. Leo ran up immediately, dragging him inside to see his toys. The morning passed in a blur of building blocks and picture books. Claire watched from the kitchen preparing lunch, and Daniel caught her smiling once or twice. It felt surreal, playing house with a woman he barely knew, and a child who was somehow his. Over sandwiches, Leo asked endless questions. What kind of cars did Daniel fix? Did he have a dog? Could he teach him to drive someday? Daniel answered each one patiently, marveling at the boy's curiosity. When nap time came, Claire guided Leo upstairs. Daniel waited in the living room, surrounded by expensive furniture that made him acutely aware of their different worlds. Claire returned, 2 mugs of tea in hand. She sat across from him, the afternoon light softening her features. They talked properly for the first time since that night 4 years ago. She told him about building her company from her father's failing electronics business, working 20-hour days, sacrificing everything personal for success. Leo had been unplanned, but never unwanted. He'd become her anchor, the one pure thing in a life of calculated risks and cutthroat negotiations. Daniel shared his own story. Growing up poor, his father's alcoholism, dropping out of community college to care for his sick mother. The garage was his escape, a place where problems had solutions and hard work meant something tangible. That night at the hotel, he'd been working a security conference and she'd been a keynote speaker hiding from networking events. They'd found each other in the hotel bar, two people seeking momentary refuge. The chemistry had been instant, overwhelming. Neither had expected consequences. Claire's vulnerability surprised him. She wasn't the ice queen her reputation suggested. She was scared, exhausted, trying to do right by a child while running an empire. She admitted she'd almost turned back a dozen times before showing up at his garage. Pride had nearly stopped her, and fear that he'd reject Leo, or worse, try to take him. Daniel understood that fear. He'd been rejected enough times to recognize its shape. "I won't hurt him. Or you." Claire's eyes met his, searching for truth. Whatever she found there made her shoulders relax slightly. They were in this together now, two imperfect people trying to build something good from broken pieces. Days blended into a routine. Daniel visited every evening after work, still smelling of grease and hard labor. Leo didn't care. He'd rush to the door, a whirlwind of excitement, pulling Daniel into whatever game or project consumed him. They built elaborate block towers, read stories about dinosaurs and space explorers, kicked a soccer ball in the backyard. Daniel discovered a patience he'd never known he possessed. Claire watched these interactions with mixed emotions: relief that Leo had taken to his father so naturally, jealousy that their bond formed so easily, and something else, something she couldn't name, watching Daniel's gentle strength with their son. One evening, after Leo had gone to bed, they sat on the back porch under stars. The cicadas sang their summer chorus. Daniel asked about her life, the real life beyond corporate press releases. She told him about loneliness at the top, about board members who saw her as a temporary custodian of her father's legacy, about the weight of decisions affecting thousands of employees. She dated occasionally, but nothing stuck. Men either wanted her money or were intimidated by her power. She'd resigned herself to raising Leo alone, convincing herself it was enough. Daniel listened without judgment. His life was simpler, but no less complicated. The garage barely broke even most months. He had dreams once of opening his own shop, maybe teaching mechanics at the community college. But dreams required capital and confidence, things in short supply. "You're good with him, better than I expected." The compliment caught Daniel off guard. He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise, but Claire pressed on, genuine in her observation. Leo needed this, needed him. And maybe she did too. The second week brought challenges. Leo had a nightmare, crying for Daniel at 2 a.m. Claire called, apologetic but desperate. Daniel drove over in his old pickup, still in sweatpants, and found Leo inconsolable. But when Daniel scooped him up, the boy quieted, burying his face against his father's shoulder. They sat in the darkened living room, Daniel humming old songs his mother had sung to him. Claire watched from the doorway, something shifting in her expression. This was real fatherhood. Not the fun parts, but the messy 3 a.m. crisis management. Daniel stayed until dawn, sleeping in the armchair with Leo curled against him. When he woke, Claire had coffee ready and gratitude in her eyes. At the garage, Marco finally cornered him, demanding answers. Daniel told him everything. Marco's reaction was predictable. Shock, excitement, crude jokes about billionaire sugar mamas. But beneath the bravado, his friend asked the question that mattered. "You falling for her?" Daniel denied it too quickly. Marco just laughed, seeing through him as always. But the question lingered. Was he? Claire was beautiful, brilliant, wounded in ways that called to his protective instincts, yet their worlds were impossibly different. When the month ended, she'd return to her penthouse and boardrooms. He'd still be here, changing oil and dreaming small dreams, unless something changed. That evening, Claire suggested they take Leo to the town fair. It was the first time they'd venture out publicly together, and Daniel felt nervous for reasons he couldn't articulate. In this small town, people talked. His quiet life was about to become very public. The fair sprawled across the community park, all lights and laughter and the smell of fried dough. Leo's eyes widened at the sight of the Ferris wheel spinning against the twilight sky. Claire looked different here, away from the house's contained environment. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose, almost unrecognizable from the CEO who'd walked into his garage. They bought tickets for rides, played rigged carnival games, shared cotton candy that turned Leo's face sticky and pink. Daniel won a stuffed elephant at the ring toss, and Leo clutched it like treasure. For a few hours, they were just a family, anonymous among the crowd. But small towns had long memories and curious eyes. Daniel felt the stares, heard the whispers. By tomorrow, everyone would know about the mysterious woman and child who'd claimed his time. Claire sensed his discomfort and squeezed his hand briefly, surprising them both. On the Ferris wheel, with Leo between them pointing at the lights below, Claire spoke softly. "Thank you for this, for giving him normal." Daniel understood. Her world was helicopters and security details, private schools, and carefully managed experiences. This was chaos and joy and sticky fingers. This was childhood. When they walked back to the parking lot, Leo asleep on Daniel's shoulder, they encountered Mrs. Patterson from the garage. Her eyes took in the scene with obvious curiosity. Claire extended her hand with practiced grace, introducing herself simply as Leo's mother. No mention of billions or boardrooms. Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly, patting Daniel's arm. "About time you settled down, Danny. That boy needs you." After she'd gone, Claire laughed softly, the sound surprising and genuine. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe the differences didn't matter as much as he feared. The third week brought an unexpected complication. Claire's board demanded her presence at an emergency meeting. A hostile takeover attempt required her immediate attention. She'd have to return to the city for at least 3 days, leaving Leo behind. The question hung between them. Could Daniel manage alone? He'd never done more than evening visits, structured hours with Claire as backup. But she had no choice. And neither did he. Leo was his responsibility now, too. The first night was chaos. Leo refused dinner, then cried for his mother at bedtime. Daniel tried everything: stories, songs, negotiations involving ice cream. Finally exhausted, he just held the boy, letting him cry until sleep came. The next morning, Daniel called in sick to the garage for the first time in 3 years. They made pancakes together, more batter on the floor than in the pan. Took a walk to the park. Visited the library for story time. Slowly, Daniel found his rhythm. He learned that Leo liked his sandwiches cut diagonally, that he needed his stuffed elephant to nap, that he had his mother's stubborn streak and his father's quiet intensity. By the third day, they'd settled into comfortable routine. Claire called every evening, video chatting with Leo, but also lingering to talk with Daniel afterward. He told her about their days. She shared her exhaustion, the endless meetings, how she missed them both. That admission surprised him. Missed them, plural. When she returned, Leo ran into her arms with squeals of joy, but he also grabbed Daniel's hand, pulling them together. "Look, Mommy, Daddy and me made cookies." The burnt edges testified to their learning curve, but Claire tasted one and declared it perfect. The 4th week arrived too quickly. Their month was nearly over, and reality pressed in. Claire had avoided the conversation, but Daniel finally forced it. They sat on the porch after Leo's bedtime, the night air cool with approaching autumn. What happened next? Claire's company needed her. Board members were circling, sensing weakness. She couldn't stay indefinitely in this small-town playing house, but she couldn't take Leo away from Daniel now either. The bond had formed, solid and real. Leo asked for his daddy constantly, included him in every plan and thought. To sever that would damage something precious. Claire proposed a solution: shared custody. She'd maintain her primary residence in the city, but bring Leo here every other weekend and holidays. Daniel could visit anytime, stay at the house she'd keep renting. They'd make it work somehow. Daniel wanted to agree, but doubt gnawed at him. Long-distance parenting felt like settling. He'd already missed 3 years. Did he want to miss half of everything going forward? But what choice did he have? He couldn't leave his garage, his life, to follow her into a world where he didn't belong. They sat in silence, the unsolvable problem between them. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Unless you came with us." Daniel's heart stopped. She couldn't mean what he thought she meant. But she continued explaining rapidly. He could open a garage in the city. She'd invest, help him build something bigger than his current struggling shop. Leo would have his father daily, not just on weekends. They could try to be a real family, not marriage, nothing forced, just an honest attempt. Daniel's mind reeled. Leave everything he knew, risk it all. Daniel didn't answer immediately. The offer was generous, perhaps too generous. It felt like charity, like she was trying to buy his presence in Leo's life. Claire sensed his hesitation and backtracked, saying she'd overstepped. But Daniel stopped her. It wasn't about pride or money. It was about whether he could be himself in her world, or if he'd just become an accessory to her life, the blue-collar father she'd rescued from obscurity. They argued for the first time, voices rising then falling as they remembered Leo sleeping upstairs. Claire accused him of being stubborn and afraid. Daniel countered that she was trying to control everything, to solve fatherhood like a business problem. The truth lay somewhere between their anger. Both were scared. Claire feared raising Leo alone again, losing the partner she'd unexpectedly found. Daniel feared becoming dependent, losing his identity to her shadow. They went to bed angry, Claire in the master bedroom, Daniel on the couch. But morning brought clarity. Leo woke them both, jumping on the couch, demanding breakfast and oblivious to adult tension. As they made eggs together, moving around the kitchen in accidental synchrony, Daniel realized something. Home wasn't the garage or this rented house or even the town he'd never left. Home was wherever Leo was, and increasingly wherever Claire was too. Over breakfast, he told her he'd think about it, seriously consider the move. But he needed time to arrange things, to talk to Marco about buying the garage, to say proper goodbyes. Claire agreed, relief evident. They had 2 more days before her planned departure, 2 days to imagine a future neither had expected, but both desperately wanted. The second to last day, Daniel took them to his garage. He wanted Leo to see where he worked, to understand this part of his father's life. Claire came too, dressed down in jeans, her corporate armor fully shed. Leo was fascinated by everything: the hydraulic lifts, the tool benches, the cars in various states of repair. Daniel let him hold a wrench, showed him how to check oil, explained engines in simple terms. Marco appeared, greeting Claire with exaggerated charm that made her laugh. He pulled Daniel aside later, his expression serious. "You're really considering this, leaving?" Daniel nodded. Marco studied him, then grinned. He'd buy the garage, been wanting his own place anyway. Daniel could consult remotely, help him through the transition. But Marco had one condition: Daniel had to promise to be happy. Life was too short for half measures. That evening, their last as a temporary family, Claire cooked dinner while Daniel helped Leo with a puzzle. The domesticity felt natural, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. After Leo was asleep, they opened a bottle of wine and talked honestly. Claire admitted her fears. That the city would change him, that he'd resent her eventually, that they were moving too fast based on chemistry and a shared child rather than real foundation. Daniel shared his own anxieties, that he'd fail in a bigger market, that he'd be the embarrassing small-town boyfriend she'd eventually outgrow, that he wasn't enough. They laughed at their mutual insecurities, and somewhere in that laughter, the tension broke. Claire kissed him tentatively, the first real kiss since that night 4 years ago. It was different now, weighted with consequence and possibility. Daniel kissed her back, and for once, neither worried about tomorrow. Moving day arrived with autumn rain. Daniel packed his life into Marco's truck, tools, clothes, a few pieces of furniture worth keeping. The apartment above the garage had never held much. His real life was starting now. The drive to the city took 4 hours. Leo chatted the entire way, excited about his new room, about having Daddy close, about everything. Claire drove ahead in her sleek car, leading them to the converted warehouse loft she'd purchased. It was massive, industrial chic, with space for Daniel's workshop on the ground floor and living quarters above. She'd thought of everything. The first weeks were adjustment. Daniel enrolled in business courses, learning the administrative side of running a real shop. Claire's lawyers handled permits and licensing. Leo started at a progressive preschool nearby. They developed new routines. Breakfast together, Leo's school drop-off, Daniel working while Claire attended meetings, evening dinners as a family. It wasn't perfect. They argued about parenting styles, about money, about whose turn it was for grocery shopping. But they also laughed, made love after Leo's bedtime, built something real from their unlikely beginning. 6 months later, Daniel's garage officially opened. Montgomery and Son Automotive, the sign read, a compromise they'd reached after heated debate. The first customer was Mrs. Patterson, who'd driven 4 hours just to support him. The second was a corporate executive with a vintage Porsche. Word spread. On the 1-year anniversary of Claire walking into his old garage, they stood on their loft's balcony watching the city lights. Leo slept inside, his room decorated with drawings of cars and spaceships. Claire leaned against Daniel, his arm around her shoulders. No regrets. Daniel kissed her temple. Just one, he said. That it took them 4 years and a child to find each other. But maybe that was the only way it could have happened. 2 people from different worlds, building a bridge from broken pieces. She smiled, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be.